Our topic for this week is bugs. And I hope that I'm not going to be let down and think that I'm going to have a big bag full of vegetables here to show you. We're not going to look at any bugs or any vegetables. We're talking a completely different way of looking at things to try to get an understanding of the shilohs involved and the differences of opinion between different things you might be hearing. And that will, to figure out exactly how to check a specific vegetable, I'm going to leave that to other people who are better at that, and it's a whole different thing, not related. Okay, we all know that we're not allowed to eat bugs. Okay, if you learn the right Gemaras, you'll find out how many lavim you ever if you eat a bug, and it's terrible. Okay, obviously it's not something that you want to do, but that doesn't mean we don't eat anything. Right? There could be bugs in anything. If you eat a carrot, there could be a bug in a carrot also. But there's halachas that tell us.
That study that the course of your lifetime you meet like 90 spiders or something just in your
Okay, good. Okay, so.
Yeah, they
okay.
I don't know about it. There's something to, I heard it on the radio.
Okay, that's wonderful. So, but of course, there's halachas that tell us what we do and don't have to be, what we have to do and what we don't have to do. So, we're going to talk about approximately, it's not exactly, but about 6 different areas of things that will tell us things that we don't have to, that we're allowed to eat, or in ways that we're allowed to say, oh, let's say a carrot. Are there ever bugs in carrots? Maybe 1 in 10,000 carrots have it. Does anybody look at their carrots for bugs? No. So we're going to try to see what these rules are that help us understand what you can and cannot eat, and with that we'll understand why there are situations where this person says you can eat it, this person says you can't eat it. Okay, we'll see. Try to see where these things fit in. Okay, the first thing is that the example of a carrot brought out for you is that there's rules of how far-fetched something has to be before you have to be concerned. Okay? And the thing is as follows. There's a rule midaraisa, and there's a rule midarabbanan. The rule on the deraisa level is, we sort of mentioned this rule last week, which is, as long as most of the foods are not going to have a bug in it, you don't have to eat. You don't have to be worried. Okay? In the midaraisa, you follow roiv. So if roiv of something is mutter, that means let's give it an example. If roiv heads of iceberg lettuce don't have bugs in them, you can eat it without checking. Okay? Midaraisa, no problem. You don't have to be worried about anything that's less than 50%. You don't have to be worried about it. Okay, so
rule of what?
We'll get to what in a second. Okay, but just take my word for now. Just roiv of something. We'll get right to that. Roiv, an iceberg lettuce would be an example. Roiv iceberg lettuce, however you want to measure it, is not going to have bugs in it. Okay, and so midaraisa, you could eat it. Okay, you could eat it without doing anything. You could just eat it as is. Don't worry about the bugs. You only wouldn't be allowed to eat things that most of the time do have bug in it. Okay, that's the din deraisa. The din derabbanan is, and that what we would call something that's over that line, that's more than half of it. It's called muchzik b'tolayim. It's assumed to have bugs in it. Okay, it's more than half of the things have bugs in it. But midrabbanan, there's a different rule, which is even if something is a miut hamatzui, even if it's a miut hamatzui, it's a minimal amount, but it's matzui, it's pretty common. It's common enough that you're going to find it. Then the Rabbanan said you can't eat it unless you check it and make sure that there are no bugs inside that thing. And most of the vegetables that we have nowadays, for sure, fall into that category of miut hamatzui. Okay, that is to say, there aren't bugs in every other one, but there are bugs commonly enough that considered miut hamatzui, and with the Rabbanan, you have to check those things. Okay, we'll talk in a second what's the difference is, whether it's the rights or the Rabbanan. Okay, we'll get to that. Well, who cares? The rights or the Rabbanan, if I can't do it, I can't do it. We'll get to that in a second. Okay. So now, as Shmuel pointed out, this is quite a discussion. Now that we have this rule called miut hamatzui, if it's common, well, what does that mean? How do I judge whether something is miut hamatzui or it's not miut hamatzui? Okay, that's a question. And this question doesn't really, well, it doesn't exactly start with bugs. The Gemara uses, the Rishonim use this wording not talking about bugs. They're talking about treifas. Okay, you know that there are treifas in milk. An animal that, in meat, animals can be, if they have something wrong with them, one of 18 different things that could be wrong with them, the animal's not kosher. There's something not healthy about the animal. You're not allowed to eat that animal. But we only check 1, maybe 2 treifas that we check for. The rest of them we don't even look at. Okay? The rest of them, most people don't even know how to look at. Okay? There aren't even people who know what to look for. And that's because they're so rare, you don't have to worry about that. Even with the Rabbanan, you don't have to worry about those things. They're just so rare, don't even bother checking for those things. So, like I said, in a carrot, did anybody here look for bugs in a carrot? No, it's so rare. If you find a bug in the carrot, like such a strange thing, you don't have to worry about that thing. So, like Shmuel said, you may end up actually eating 9 spiders in your life, okay? But it doesn't make a difference. The Torah said, don't worry about that. The Torah said, even if it's roiv of a thing, you don't have to eat. But surely, even if meat hamatzik, not meat hamatzik, don't worry about it. You can eat, don't worry about the spiders. Okay, now, so there's a tshuva from Mishkanas Yaakov who tried to give a number to this year, okay? And he came from a diak in the Gemara. It had nothing to do with bugs. The Gemara has to do with, it's a Kosher Mishpat Gemara. It's about selling something to somebody else, and he sold him wine, and it turned out to be vinegar. It had nothing to do with bugs at all. Okay, it's a Gemara about someone, when you deal with somebody, how much spoilage you could take in your product. And he makes a cheshbon, he says that the shear is 10%. If there's more than 10% of that vegetable are infested, then you have to check it. If it's less than 10%, then you don't have to check it. So, for example, you take romaine lettuce. Okay, let's give a number. 1 out of 8 has bugs in it. You have to check it before you eat it. Carrots, apples. How often do you see a bug in an apple? I mean, once in 100 apples, maybe you'll find one time you'll find a worm coming out of it. You're not mechuyev to check it. No chiv to check that thing, even midrabanan. Okay, as opposed to your romaine lettuce that you do have to check because it happens often enough that you have to check. Okay, now the Mishkanas Yaakov says this year of 10%, and just about everybody accepts that. There are those who don't, but just about everybody accepts that. Well, let me take that back. Just about everybody, if they take numbers, accepts that. But there's another way of looking at it. Rav Belsky has a different way of looking at it, based on Chuvas Rivash, who's a Rishon, well before the Mishkanas Yaakov. And his way of looking at it is he doesn't take numbers. He doesn't like this percentage-wise, which is a very like a mathematical and certain way of looking at things. He says it depends on, are you surprised if you find the bug? That is to say like this. If you check cucumber, if you look at a cucumber and a bug would crawl out of your cucumber, you'd be, oh my gosh, tell the guy next to you, do you see what just happened to me? I found a bug in my cucumber. If you found a bug in something else, in some other vegetables, in broccoli, if you found a bug in broccoli, you wouldn't be so surprised. It happens often enough that to you it's not a surprise to see that. Okay? And the Mishkanas Yaakov is really not arguing on that. They're agreeing to that. He's just saying he's putting a number on it and saying the number is, if it happens more than 10%, that's considered common. Less than 10% is not. Okay, so they're trying to make an official explanation for what does this thing mean that it's common. It's mid hamatzui. It happens. It's matzui to happen. Well, what does matzui mean? So the Mishkanas Yaakov is saying 10%, and it's sort of accepted. But although everyone is accepting the Mishkanas Yaakov, but the practical application of that is very hard to pin down, which is as follows. Let's say I have rice. Okay, in America we don't have bugs in rice. Okay, but in other countries they do. Other countries there's bugs in rice for whatever reasons. So in those countries, let's say if I check, so we say 10%. If there's 10% have a bug in it, then it's usher. So what does that mean? Does that mean there's 10 grains of rice? That means if there's one bug in 11 grains of rice, okay, that means like this. If every 11 grains of rice would have one bug in them, you'd be allowed to eat rice without checking? Does that make sense? Does that make any sense? Imagine if every 11 grains of rice, for every 11 grains there would be one bug. Would you think that you would be allowed to eat that? Something doesn't seem right about that, right? That means your plate of rice is crawling with bugs, right? I mean, you have 500 pieces of rice, and that means you have 50 bugs crawling through this thing. Right? Something doesn't seem right about that. Okay, so you say, there's one camp says you look at it by the unit, and they say, and the other camp says you look at it by the serving. Okay, they say if 1 in 10 servings. Remember, this is an issur on people to eat bugs, not an issur on vegetables to have bugs. It's an issur on people to eat them. So they say if 10% of the servings will have bugs, then you're not allowed to eat it.
There's no difference between live and dead?
No, there's no difference in live and dead. No difference. We'll see later, maybe a little difference, but no, live and dead is all the same thing. Okay, don't think that. If you want to count up exactly how many lavin you're over, maybe it depends. Okay, but for our purposes, it's us. So the simpler way to understand it, and the way most people understand it, is that it depends on servings. That is to say, let's say we make up an amount. We say that a serving of rice is 3 ounces. I'm just making up a number. A serving of rice is 3 ounces. That means if there's a bug in every 30 ounces, one bug in every 30 ounces, I mean 1 in every 10 servings, that's considered common. If there's going to be a bug in only every 35 ounces, then that's not considered common, and you would eat it without checking. Okay, do you guys hear that? Would that make sense? Okay. The others say, no, it goes by the product. Okay, so now, when you're talking about something like, let's say, a head of lettuce, that'll be an easier way. They'll say, if in 1 in 10 heads has a bug in it, you're not allowed to eat it. And the other first opinion that I said to you will say is if 1 in 10 servings of lettuce. Okay, now 1 head of lettuce has maybe 20 servings in it. Okay, so there's a very big difference between them, right? Between 1 head of lettuce. But the question is going to be, what are they going to do with blueberries? And what are they going to do with rice? What are they going to do with things that are very small? Do you really think that imagine if you took a container of blueberries, has got 200 blueberries in it, okay, and there'd be 10 bugs crawling around there. So that seems pretty common. So it's hard to believe that you go, so they came up with a compromise.
There's a big difference though. Rice, nobody except one piece of rice eats it.
Okay.
Blueberries, people do.
Okay, maybe that's the difference. They came up with a difference. They said it goes by how it's sold. We go by a group. Like when you go to the store and you buy a head of broccoli, you buy there's a certain like size that you could buy in the store comes together. That's like the unit. Okay, now this is completely arbitrary. Okay, it's nothing. It's hard to say that that's the truth. Blueberries come in pints, and rice comes in 1 pound container. But it seems very arbitrary. Well, it depends on how Ted decides to pack their fruit. To depend on what so the sheet that seems to be the most straightforward and the most easiest to put a handle on is to go by servings. The issue is on people. You're not allowed to eat bugs. So if you're going to eat bugs once every 10 times, they're not allowed to. Okay, but the question's going to be, even this side has its problems, which is, okay, what happens if this we won't call them names. A person gets up one night, 3 o'clock in the morning, and he's really hungry. This really happened. And the only thing to eat in the house is, okay, in the case that I knew about, was, what do they call it? I can't think what he ate. Okay, the person ate like a ridiculous amount. Okay, the only thing he could find was broccoli in his house to eat. Okay, and he didn't eat what we would consider a normal serving. He ate 4 pounds of broccoli. Okay, so does that mean that for this guy, at this sitting now, the shear changes for this guy?
He ate 4 servings.
So you think he ate just a lot of servings? You think the shear should still be a serving, and that's how most people say it. It goes by what an average, let's say we take a range of what's average serving.
If you go to a Chinese restaurant and you get a container of, fried rice or something, nobody's supposed to eat the entire container. But if you do, so you ate more than
So you ate more than one serving. So you say the shear should be by a serving, and that's how most people take it. The shear is a serving. We'll look at a range of serving. We don't all eat the same amount, but we'll take a range. We'll find what's considered average or the high end of average of serving. And if one Meshuggah sits up all night eating his fried rice, then it doesn't make a difference. I'm going to have to come to what the guy was eating.
Every product comes with a slide listing of how many servings in the products.
Okay, so you're saying there's like
the government regulation or whatever.
Okay, well,
that's not realistic.
No, what it is the government doesn't. The government doesn't tell them how much a serving is. You're allowed to choose what you want to be the serving. You as long as you do something within reason. You can't. But maybe that's just gives us an idea. If you look at a container of blueberries and it says has 4 servings in it, or it has 14 servings, we'll get a sort of a feel for what's considered a normal serving. You know what I mean? Maybe. So we'll look at it at the average servings, and within this we would probably go to the higher end of average. What is, some people eat less, a little, we'll go to the high end and then use that as our measure. Okay, that's basically acceptable. I'm telling you that there are others who don't. Others who look at it and say, no, it depends on units. For example, on heads of lettuce is a big difference. Okay? How many people can eat 1 head of romaine lettuce? Okay, how much is that enough people for? Salad for 5 people, 8 people, I don't know, a lot of people, right? But if you go by units, if there would be a bug in 10 heads of romaine lettuce, we would consider it a miyat hamatzui. Okay, but if you go by servings, then maybe 1 bug in 2 heads would already be not a miyat hamatzui. Okay, so that would help us. But I have to tell you, in all of this discussion we're having so far, it is almost no difference. Okay, what I mean to say is that pretty much people have a feel for which vegetables are miyat hamatzui and which ones are not miyat hamatzui. As soon as we get the feeling, nobody has to do deep studies to find out that cucumbers aren't miyat hamatzui. None of us has ever seen a bug in a cucumber, and if we ever did, it was like really something really unusual. We don't worry about cucumbers. Other vegetables, asparagus, that's bugs in them. They find them in this little piece, a little triangle there. There's bugs in there. People are used to that. Fine, they know what to look for. They know that there's miyat hamatzui.
Is that really?
So if we sat down with the numbers, okay, we may find that it's one of these borderline cases, but most of the cases are pretty clear. What ends up being a question, not what's miyat hamatzui. Miyat hamatzui, people sort of have a feel for it, and maybe even it's like a Rabbi Belsky's way of looking at it, which is, are you surprised to find the bug in it? Okay, and that sort of helps identify to people.
Yeah, but all of those things change when they stop using pesticides.
Yes, you're correct. Things change in America when they stop using pesticides, and it depends country to country. In one place, what's here, nobody here, I don't know one that I know, almost no one that I know, sifts their flour.
Right.
We don't find bugs in flour in America. That's because the way they process flour and what they do to it. But in other countries, people sift their flour and find bugs all the time. Okay, so people from other places will sift them, in Eretz Yisrael especially, they sift it, and they find bugs all the time. So,
We sifted the flour in there and sold for many years. I don't think I ever found the bug.
okay, so eat, well, we'll, whatever, okay, eat, let's accept that, okay. But there are places,
He would go find Red Belt, he would be surprised.
he would be surprised. So then there's not a Miyanamatsu. So then he says,
They say it's not there. They say it's
after
not
doing
the
it for
case.
so long, so the question is whether he was doing it right. That's we don't have to go, dig out.
Sifter is a sifter.
Also, the being surprised and find one, does that go on you or on people in general?
In general, I mean, is this the kind of thing that you usually? I mean, people in this area, okay? I mean, this is that if and the people who do this kind of work, like in checking vegetables, have to pay attention to where vegetables come from. You know, vegetables growing in California and vegetables growing in Mexico, they're not the same. They don't grow the same way. You know, vegetables growing in, I think it's Guatemala, is a really high altitude. There's no bugs there. Okay, the stuff comes out very clean from there. So you have to know where you're getting your vegetables from and how it was stored. You have to understand, try to break these things down. It's not always the same. You know, it's not. You can't make a rule. When we're going to make a little study here in West Rogers Park and decide for the world. You know, but it's a certain. But now, what the difference comes is to decide what's a mir hamatzui and what's muhsik. I told you that if it's more than 50% bugs, okay, more than half of the things have bugs in it, that's asa midaraisa. I'm going to tell you in a second what the difference is. And there, it makes more of a difference. How you measure these 50%, 50% of what? Again, it can't mean 50% of grains of rice, right? That's ridiculous. It can't be that if there'd be a bug in every third grain that midaraisa you're allowed to eat that, right? Obviously, that's not true. So we have to, knowing what is muhsik and what's just mir hamatzi is more important, okay? What's the difference? Who cares if it's asa midaraisa or midrabanan? What's the difference? So the Gemara really tells us a difference, not about bugs, again about trephis. The Gemara says, what happens? You will know that the trephis that we check for is the lungs. Okay, go to see if there are any holes in the animal's lungs. Okay, so the Gemara is trying to talk about what happens if you lost the animal's lungs. You shot to the animal, you didn't get to check the lungs, and you lost it. Okay, so now what do you do now? You don't know whether this animal is a trephis or it's not a trephis. You have no way of checking the lungs to see if the animal's a trephis. What do you do now? So the rule is, what do you say?
Sell to the Arabs.
Sell to the Arabs. Okay. The rule is that if the trephis would be something that midaraisa would be usher, okay, more than 50% that would be treif, you have to throw the animal out. You have to assume that it's treif. If it's only usher midarabanan, then now that it had to be, but yeah, it would be mutter. You wouldn't have to. Nev the hooray. If you lost the lung, you'll have to eat it. You don't have to be choishish that the lung had a problem with it. Okay, so it's relevant to know what's meat and what's muksuk, to know what happens if something went wrong. Okay, we didn't get to check it. Okay, it was already made into food, and no one got to check it. Okay, or a much more serious, much more practical, or halacha l'maisa example is like this. What happens if you have we're going to talk in a couple of minutes that when the bugs are whole, they can't be bottled. When bugs are broken up, when they're not whole, they can be bottled. We're going to talk about that in a second. Okay, we'll get to that in pretty soon. Okay, when they're not whole, they can be bottled. What happens if you don't know whether the bugs are whole or they're broken up? Okay, you don't know if the bugs are whole or they're broken up in your food. How do you treat that food?
You have to know whether bugs are usually found whole.
Well, usually, when you start, they're whole. If you pick up a vegetable, you pick up a piece of broccoli, if the bugs are in there are assumed to be whole, what would be different about that? But let's say you cooked it. Let's say you cooked the broccoli. Now the cooking may have broken apart the bug. Right? If you take the raw vegetable, why should the bugs be broken up? But once you cook it, or you chop it, or you do something to it, then you start to have this. We have a suffix that maybe you broke it up. So the Rashba says like this. He says, if the bug is muhsik, if it's assumed to have bugs in it, then you say, well, I know that there are bugs in there. I'm assuming there are bugs in there. Maybe it was broken up. Maybe it wasn't. So I'm not allowed to eat it. But what happens if it's only asur midrabanan? So I'm not even sure there are bugs in there. So I say, maybe there's no bugs in there. And even if there are bugs in there, maybe the bugs are broken up. It's a sveka. Okay, it's a double suffix. I have a suffix after even bugs are in the first place. The Rabbanah tell me to be concerned there might be bugs, but it's not for sure. Maybe there are bugs, and maybe they were broken up. Okay, so then that's called the sveka, and then you're allowed to eat it. Okay, so what? What does that mean? Now, you're not allowed to create sveka by yourself. You're not allowed to put yourself into that situation. You can't go cook it up and say, okay, now it's a suffix and maybe it happened. But the Pesach Tshuva says, what happens if you have a product that's really, really difficult to check? It's so hard to check it, you'll never be able to check it. Then you're allowed to make the sveka by yourself. And the example that we have of that is, the very real example, and it's almost exactly the case that the Pesach Tshuva is talking about is, commercially, I'm not talking about in your house, because in your house you could check this. Commercially, if you want to make raspberry preserves, what are preserves? Jams and preserves. Okay, let me break you down for you. There's three levels of those things. There's jelly, jam, and preserves. Okay, jelly means you turn the fruit or the vegetable into a juice, into juice, like grape juice, and then you do something to solidify it. Okay, so grape jelly starts off as grape juice, completely liquefied, and then you do something to solidify it to turn it into a block, into a jelly. Okay? But jam and preserves means you actually have whole fruits in there. You don't turn it into juice first. You break up the fruit, and then whatever you do to make it into a solid block, but it has actual pieces of fruit in it. Okay? So those are cut up. Now, in the jelly, there's no bugs. Okay? Actually, there are no whole bugs. Okay? The thing's been turned into a liquid. There aren't any whole bugs in jelly. Okay? But what happens if you have raspberry preserves? So the raspberries have bugs in them, and the raspberry has now been broken up, and are the bugs in their whole or they're not whole? We don't know if they're whole or not. Okay, we don't know if they're, at this point, whether they're whole, we don't know. Some of the fruit makes it through whole. They're actually, that's why people buy it, the preserves, because they have chunks of fruit in it, so maybe the bug got through whole also. But they're not cutting it so finely. They want the chunks to stay. So, if raspberries are only meat hamotzi, then they're mutter. You have a suffix if there was a bug there in the first place. Even if there was a bug there in the first place, maybe it was broken up. The Shach says that it's mutter. Okay? And even though we're not allowed to do this l'chatchila, but the Pesach Tshuva says he's almost exactly talking about this case. Pesach Tshuva says if it's so difficult commercially, there's no one who could sit and check raspberries commercially. Imagine trying to check zillions and zillions of raspberries to make jam. That's not commercially. The Pesach Tshuva says in that case you're allowed to do it even l'chatchila. That's if you hold that it's a mir hamotzi. If you hold that it's muchzik b'tolim, if you hold that it's awesome with the rice to keep the raspberries before checking them, then you only have one supplement. It's a awesome with the rice. Maybe it got broken up. Maybe not. You're not allowed to eat it. Okay, so if you see raspberry jam or preserves, okay, that's being made, or you see another food made with raspberries, you see a pie with raspberries inside of it, okay? Unless you're buying a brand that's particular to use Bodek raspberries, okay? But if you then that's different. But if you buy any regular store brand or any regular commercial brand, they're not using Bodek raspberries. Why are they making? How could they make something with pieces of raspberries in it? They're not checking it. The answer is they're assuming that the raspberries are only a min hamotzi, and something if it was misrasik, something if it wasn't, and then they're allowed to use it. Okay, it's more because of sex.
Not when it reaches that mitzvahs?
Right. It's very debatable whether it's min hamotzi or muchzik b'tolim. It's very debatable, raspberries in particular, and it depends on how you judge min hamotzi. When we say if it's more than 50%, then it's usher. More than 50% what? If the rule is 50% of berries, it's not going to be muchzik. Every other berry does not have a bug in it. No. But if you say servings, then maybe it does. Then you're starting to get, depending on how you judge how you measure whether something is meat or much or mostly will depend where raspberries fall. Okay? We're doing our own work on raspberries, and there's another hashgacha who I was just talking to Thursday, Friday, I don't remember anymore, who's doing work on raspberries also, to pinpoint this. Okay? Their feeling, as they're going into this, is that the raspberries, this is how they said to me, I'm going to almost say it to you word for word. What I said is, their mashgichim report back to them that lots of times the raspberries come back clean, but when they get infested, it's worse with their geferlich. Okay, so, and which is sort of meshed with what we've seen so far, which is you can go through a bunch of containers or size things and get nothing, and then you find one and it's all full of bugs. Okay, so that description, listen to what I just said, is min hamotzi. Means is that it's not unusual to find bugs, but it's not, far-fetched that you find the bug in there, but you can have plenty of clean ones also. Okay, that's min hamotzi kind of talk. But
until now, the organization is accepting that that's the fact.
That's min hamotzi. They've been assuming that it's a min hamotzi. Okay?
No one assumes it's muhsik.
Well, I can say no one does. There are those who say it does, and it depends. It depends how you measure this stuff. Okay, it's going to depend on stuff we're going to talk about later also. Other parts of that question are going to fall into it also, but it depends how you measure to decide whether it's mir hamotzi mos. If you see a hashgacha, there are hashgachas who won't give hashgacha raspberry preserves.
Yeah.
Okay, so you won't see that. They don't have a post that says we don't give hashgacha on raspberry preserves, but they won't because they think it's musaf. Okay? Therefore, they won't do it.
Because when they find one of the cases that's infested, they throw that out.
No, they don't. When a
If
mashgiach,
if a mashgiach's in a plant that's making raspberry preserves, and there's 300 cases there, and he looks through, 10 of them, and 9 of them have nothing in it, and one is infested with bugs, he lets that go into the jam.
When I
he takes that box out
Okay,
and
so-
throws it out.
when I said people are checking, that means people are buying raspberries and checking them for research. There are, if you go to Polliner and you go to the people making raspberries, there isn't a mashgiach standing there checking every batch. I'm not saying that there aren't people who do that. There might be hashgachos who would do that, who would have a guy check it, and we'll get that in a second. If you check it, you could make it mutter. Yeah, you could do that. There are people who could do that. When you bodeks vegetables that they make without bugs are a two-step process. All their vegetables are a two-step process. One is they get clean produce coming in. I mean, they only accept certain produce coming in. They check it before it even walks into the plant. It'll have to meet a certain level of cleanliness before it even walks into the plant. Cleanliness, I mean, it's free of bugs. And then second is they do a washing to it. Okay? But they won't even touch stuff that's not even clean. So like you said, when the truck pulls up and the guy they'll take a bunch of samples, they'll look at it. If they think it's too infested, they say, forget it, we don't even want this at all. Forget it. We don't want to touch it. If it comes back pretty clean, okay, or up to whatever standard they want to take, then their cleaning will make sure that it's fully clean. Okay, that's it. Okay. Okay, next thing is, we all know, everybody, 99% of the world agrees, that if bugs are microscopic, okay, the bugs are so small that you can't see them, then they're mutter. Okay, everybody knows, 99% of the world agrees that. Okay, that the din is that if a bug is microscopic, school talks about eating spiders, but you know that there's loads of microscopic things floating around. Okay, this was a shaila 200 years ago when they first discovered these things floating around, and it's fine. It's mutter. Okay. Why is it mutter? Listen, bugs are awesome. Why are those bugs mutter? We know that it's mutter, but why is that? So the answer is the Gemara uses a term, two terms, the same thing. One is the Rebbe gave the Torah to us, to humans, and we're supposed to use our facilities to follow what he said. If there's something that we can't physically do, how could I know if there's microscopic things going into my mouth? The Rebbe didn't expect that from me. So when the Torah says don't eat a bug, it meant certain kind of bugs that humans can deal with. Okay? And another way of saying that, so the Rebbe is not trying to trick us and catch us and I'm throwing spiders into your mouth while you're sleeping. Okay? He's not trying to get us. So that's not what he's not trying to get us. So he doesn't ask for things that are not within our control. Within reasonable control, we're not asked to do this. Okay, those are two sides of the same coin. Okay, so microscopic bugs are mutter. Okay, what happens? Now, what I'm about to tell you is a very serious shaila, and it's a huge nafkamina between the two completely different camps in the world about how to deal with this thing, and has a lot of practical application. What happens if I have something that you see on the table here? There's a little white spot. Okay, you could see the spot. Everyone could see it. There's a spot over here. But if you don't look under magnification, you wouldn't know that it's a bug. Okay? Like for example, go into your house and you have yeast in your house. Okay, if you have yeast in your house, powdered yeast in your house, take the yeast. Could you see the yeast? Of course you can see it. Could you see that that's really a live, living thing? No, you can't see that. If you magnify it, you would find out that it's a living thing. Or you have vinegar. A lot of the place can talk about vinegar has the bacteria that live in it and whatever the bugs that were in there. You could see the stuff, but you can't see that it's a bug. That has nothing. If I look at this spot over here, it just looks like a piece of dirt or a piece of dandruff. It doesn't look like a bug. If you magnify it, we might find out that this thing really is alive. Okay, is that thing mutter or is it usher? I can see it. It's not microscopic, but I can't see that it's a bug. I can't identify that this thing is a bug. Now, you'll all agree, if that thing started walking across the table, okay, then it would be usher. What I mean to say is, even though when it's walking, I still don't know that it's a bug. I don't see any legs or arms or something like that. But guess what? Dandruff doesn't walk. Okay, so if it's walking across the table, I just figured out that it's a bug. Right? Then I got it. I understand that thing is a bug now. But what happens if it's not moving? It's just sitting there. It's just sitting there. Maybe it's dead. Maybe it's, whatever. It's sleeping. I don't know. It's not moving. Is that thing usher for me to eat or not? So there are, I'll say a small group. I'm biased when I'm saying this, but there's a small group of poskim who say that that's also. They say is, once you can see it, once you can see the item, if it happens to be that it's a bug, then it's also. Okay? Maybe they'll hold, I'm being more on the source, maybe they'll hold that if you can't see, you don't have a microscope, then they would say is, you're nine-ness, no, what could you do? What could you do? It really was usher. You had no way of telling, but you might be off the hook. But really it's usher. So therefore, you're going to have to look at all those spots with magnification to find out that there's no bug there. Because if that thing really is a bug, you're not allowed to eat it. Okay? And most poskim hold, it doesn't make any sense. Listen to the logic. Why were microscopic things mutter in the first place? Because the Bershom only expects us to figure things out based on the tools that we have. Well, assuming that my eyesight is good, or I have a pair of glasses, I'm seeing normal what the Bershom expects me to see, then I'm seeing what I'm supposed to see. If I can't see it's a bug, what do you want from my life? How am I supposed to not eat that thing? You said don't eat bugs. Okay, how am I supposed to not eat the bug when I can't tell that it's a bug? It just looks like dirt to me. So most poskim hold that a bug like that is mutter. Most poskim hold that if a bug is, you could see it, but you can't recognize it with your own eyes, then it's mutter.
How far do you have to go to be able to recognize it?
What do you mean, how far do you have to go?
Well, they have these light boxes that are a big deal for a long time.
Okay.
They have these light boxes.
We'll get to light boxes in a second. Light boxes,
On my side, I've used them before. When you actually put the leaf on top of the light box, you can see a nice-sized bug with lights.
so the answer to that is, we're really going to give that in a second, but the answer to that is that you're expected to use all normal facilities, which is to say, sunlight is brighter than just looking, even in this kind of a room. Sunlight is very bright. Sunlight is considered a normal thing that a person can use. It's one of the tools that you have. You have to look in good sunlight to see if a bug is there. That'll help you see it. Okay? So the light box is a way of giving you very good light. Okay? It's not, I don't consider that to be like, something beyond normal use. Instead of holding your vegetables up like this to the sun, you're putting them down. It's more comfortable, and that's how you're checking them. Okay? That's considered, almost everybody considers that to be normal use, normal way of checking the thing. Okay? As opposed to, that's not the favorite is a loop. Okay? Jewelers use a little magnifying glass to carry around. That loop, that's not, so to speak, normal. That's not what you weren't born with that. Okay? That's not the way you're expected to see. And most told that doesn't count. Okay? Now, just for mentioning it, I'll mention two of the riots that they bring to the other side, to those who say that it's also. One is, Rashi says in Eruvin, that a sheretz, the reason why it's called a sheretz, okay, the word sheretz comes from the word sherutz, that it runs, because Rashi says you can tell that it's a bug because it runs. Okay, you could tell that it's a bug when it moves, because otherwise you might not recognize what it is. So they say, you see that a sheretz means even something that you can't identify. Because you can't tell what it is. Rashi says you can only tell when it starts to move, yet it's still considered a sheretz. The whole name sheretz comes from the fact that it's only something that moves. And what's wrong with that proof is that the Gemara gives examples. Rashi is going on the Gemara that gives examples. Okay, and one of the Gemara's examples, the Gemara has a bunch of examples. The smallest that I could tell of those examples was a namala, which means an ant. Okay, an ant. If you look at an ant, just about every ant, you could see that it's an ant. But everybody could recognize it with their own eyesight. But it means that I think what what Rashi is trying to say is, that if I saw an ant down on the floor, at a distance, not I was looking carefully, I saw it at a distance, I might not recognize it until I saw it moving. Okay, if you see an ant hill, okay, from a distance it looks like a clump of dirt. When all of a sudden you see all the movement around it, you realize there's something alive in that thing. Okay? Rashi doesn't mean to say that the things are only, that they're so small that you can't even see them, what they are. And another, one of the, what they consider the biggest proof is from a Rashba, brought in the Ramah. And the proof is not from the Rashba, because if you see the Rashba, I'll tell you in a second, it's not a proof. But if the Ramah brings it, and the Ramah says that there are black dots, Ramah Hilchos Tolaim, there are black dots that look just like a black dot, and everybody knows that they're bugs, so you're not allowed to eat them. That's what the Ramah says. So that sounds like he's describing our case. It's a black dot, looks like just a plain spot. Everybody knows that it's a bug. The Ramah says you're not allowed to eat it. So they say, aha, you see, here's something that's tiny. It just looks like a black dot, and it's also anyhow. But what's wrong with that is that the Rashba, if you look back at the Rashba, this is the Ramah's right out of a Rashba. What did the Rashba say? The Rashba's case was they had these bugs, and there's spots, and they couldn't tell if they were bugs. So the Rashba says what they used to do was they would scoop this spot out, okay, and they would put it on their nails, and it would run. Okay, it would start running across their hands, so they could tell that the thing was alive. Okay, so what happened was they used what we'll call normal means. They use the regular ways of figuring something out to figure out that, I don't remember what the vegetable was. Let's think it was peas, okay? They forgot that black spot that has a certain look to it is a bug because they got used to the fact that it walks. When it's stuck in the vegetable, it doesn't, but when they take it out, then it does walk. That's like to say, you recognize a cat as being a cat because of the features that it has. You're used to the long tail and the way it walks. There are things that make you realize it. So they also got used to that shaping us through means that were considered legal. Like they put it on their hands and it would run across. Okay, the Rajput didn't have a microscope. They didn't look. That's not how they figured it out. So that doesn't mean anything. Now, so far, we're everyone's agreeing. But what happens like this? I'm going to start you with a story. I say this story because it really brings out the point. Rabbi Schechter was once sitting in shul, and the guy comes over to him and says, my tefillin are not square. Your tefillin have to be square. My tefillin are not square. Rabbi Schechter says, okay, let's see. So they take off the guy's tefillin. They put on a piece of paper. And, let's say they measure off one side. They put a line there to see how big it is. They turn it the other way, and they put it's in the same spot. It's square. Rabbi says, yeah, the guy, your tefillin are square. So the guy says like this. He says, I'm a dentist, and I spend my life looking at people's teeth. We're doing very fine work on people's teeth. So I have learned to focus on such small things and stay focused on such small things that I can see from a distance that my tefillin are not square. The way I see things, to me it's obvious that this side is longer than that side. Because I've learned, I spent so many years working as a dentist, I see things that you don't see. You think it's square, but I'm telling you that it's not square. I don't even need a tool to measure. I can see from here that it's not square. And Rabbi Schechter's response to the guy was, you don't have normal vision. You, just like a person who has poor vision can't be a person to check vegetables because you'll miss things. If I take off my glasses, I can't check vegetables. I can't see anything. So how am I going to check? Also, you with the extra good vision are also not a good judge of whether something is whether your tefillin are square or whether a bug is also. If you have such special eyesight, that doesn't count. And this came out. I don't know if you remember about 2 years ago, maybe it was. There was a tumult that strawberries have bugs in them, which is true. Strawberries do have bugs in them, but that even if you wash them off, you can't get the bugs off. You may have heard that. Okay, most the hashgachos say is if you cut off the top of a strawberry, let's say the green part with a little bit of the top underneath it, and you rinse it under water, you'll get rid of any bugs that there are. The bugs congregate under the green on the top of the strawberry. If you cut that part off and rinse it off, you won't have any bugs. And these people said is no, there are bugs. Even if you do that, there's still bugs. So the CRC brought one of the people who was the leaders of this tumult, brought him here to show us these bugs. We couldn't find them. We did our checking. We cut it off, rinse it off. We didn't find any bugs. So we brought this guy here, and he came here, a respected person, and he came in, and he said, you clean it first, your way, then bring me the vegetables. Bring me the strawberries. And then he went in, he took the bugs off that he found off the strawberries, put them onto a piece of paper, onto a cloth that was white, and he circled them. Okay? So everyone could tell exactly where they were. And there were be'erach 30 people in the room. Okay? Of the 30 people in the room, you were there? Of the 30 people who were in the room, I'll say 27 of them could not see the bug. He had circled them. He says there's 5 bugs in that strawberry. And he circled the 5 bugs. And 27 people said, well, yeah, there's dirt on the cloth, but there's nothing. There's no bug there. Okay? 3 people in the room says, oh my gosh, of course there's a bug. I see the bug. Okay, now, why did 3 people see the bug and 27 people didn't see the bug? You know what the answer is?
Politics.
No, it's not politics. The answer is, those 3 people who saw the bug were all people who have...
Able to check bugs.
No, if that would be, I wouldn't say that. Because maybe they have more experience than you do, and maybe you're required to get used to it. But I'm going to say, it's a step past what you said. Those 3 people were all people who have been trained to check bugs with magnification. Those people... During their checking, this went off like an hour or 2, this whole process, those people pulled out their loops regularly. What I'm saying is that those people have trained themselves that they could see that I think that this spot and this spot are both dandruff. Okay? But they have gotten used to looking at things in a way that tells them that this one is dandruff and that one is a bug. Okay, now to me they both look the same. But they've used methods that are beyond what they didn't expect from you, to learn to identify these things, one as a bug and one as can't you tell, don't you see that this one has this long edge over there, and that's its tail. You don't see the tail over there? Now, me and you don't see a tail there. But they, having seen it so many times on the magnification, know that that's the tail, and the thing on the side there is his knapsack, and his brother is sitting next to him. They see all these things in there. I'm telling you, you have to see these three guys they saw everything. They had a whole family history there. And 27 people in the room didn't see a blessed thing. We just saw a spot. So what happens is that the people who have spent time learning it, and that's correct. You should spend time learning. If I'm not like this, if you pick up a floret of broccoli and say, I don't see any bugs, then you're missing it. Someone has to show you where to look for the bugs. They have to tell you have to finger your way through to find the bugs on the inside. That much, you have to be trained to do that. But if you've taught yourself to see things that the average person doesn't see, then most places can hold, that doesn't make a difference. That doesn't count. You're not an average eyesight. Now again, there are those who say that is usher anyhow, because once you could see the spot, then it's usher anyhow. And what's happened is that there's a big split. Okay, there are two completely different camps. Okay, one camp who says is that if I could see the spot, and especially if you're one of these guys who could see with their own eyes, could tell you that spot is a bug and this one is not a bug, then they say it's awesome. Okay, and there's a whole other camp that says is if an average person looking at this thing doesn't see that it's a bug, then it's a bug. Okay, and that plays out in a many different ways. The strawberries is one example. This has something to do with the shiloh of the bugs in New York's water. Okay, the New York water has many complications to it, but one of the questions about the bugs in that water has to do with this. These are things that, just think for a second. People, there are, I think, 8 million people in New York, okay, and they had all been drinking water for a very long time, okay, and aside from the tumult that's been going on, that there's bugs in their water, those millions of people are drinking it and don't see any bugs, right? Why don't they see any bugs? Why don't there are millions of people drinking, they don't see any bugs? That tells you that maybe these bugs are not recognizable to regular people. Right? Doesn't that tell you something? There's millions of people drinking water every day. They don't see bugs. So
They're not looking for us.
they're not. But people have looked at their cups of water for years, right? The guy's 50 years old. How many cups of water has he drank? And he doesn't ever remember seeing one in there. So this is part of that. There are many complications to that child. That's its own special thing. Baruch Hashem, we don't live there.
I was there.
Okay, it's its own special complication. There's lots, but one of the parts of the shiloh is of the things that are said to be bugs, things that average people can recognize as bugs. Okay, and for better or for worse, the people who are the expertise in these things are often the same people who have this kind of training. Okay, who have training in a way that gives them not average eyesight. One of the people once said to me, "I'll show you how to." He says, "You don't recognize it as a bug?" I said, "No, don't look anything to me." He says, "I'll teach you how." I said, "I don't want to learn from you, because if I learn from you, then I can't check vegetables at home anymore. Then I can't check my vegetables. Then I have all of a sudden these, X-ray vision. I can't check it anymore. All of a sudden I'm not able to see it." Okay? So anyhow, most of the poskim who understand the shiloh as it's described to them will tell you that this thing is mutter. Okay? Others either hold it. There are those who hold it, it's usher, and there are those who have been, if I could use the word, misled into saying that it's usher. In other words, if a person comes in and says, "I see the bug, I no magnification, I see it myself, I'm looking at it, I know that it's a bug," then, okay, if you know that it's a bug, then it's awesome. Okay? And this is going to play out in one of the last things we're going to talk about if we get that far. Okay? We'll see if we get there. Okay. The next part is, a person is mechuyev to check their vegetables. Once they're mi and hamatzui are bugs that are usher, you're mechuyev to check them. You're not mechuyev to check it with a loop. Everyone agrees that. You don't have to check it with a loop. You don't have to check it with infrared blue light, I forgot how you call it, okay, which I've seen people doing. Okay, you can check it with blue, there's a name for it. A special light that helps you see these things. You're mechuyev to do things that average people are able to use, like sunlight. A light box is a convenient way of using sunlight, okay? One of the shilohs that came up is, remember a few months ago there was a question about whether raisins have bugs in them?
Yeah.
Okay, but if we get to it, we'll find out why they're mutter. Why, even if there are bugs in them, they're mutter. But one of the shilohs was that in order to find the bug, did anybody here ever see bugs in their raisins? No. It happens. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. Yes, there are people who actually see moms like worms crawling out of the things. But most people have never seen a bug in a raisin. Okay? And so when the first thing started that they talk about bugs in raisins, we checked some raisins. We didn't see any bugs. So we said to the guys, we called the people up who had started and said, "Guys, we don't see any bugs. What's going on?" So they said, "No, because you didn't know how to check for them." Okay? What you have to do is you have to soak the raisins for 2 hours. 7 times. And then, I'm not kidding you. And then, in the water that you come from that thing, you'll find bugs. Okay? So now, the question is, when you say that you're mechuyev to check it, Do you think that's what you're mechuyev to do? That was one of the questions going on there. Are you mechuyev to soak your raisins, like the Gemara says, a turmeric has to be cooked 7 times? Okay, do you have to soak it 7 times for 2 hours at a shot in water to find that your raisins are moist? Obviously, you're not going to eat these raisins after you did that. Right? They're not going to be raisins anymore when this is over. So, are you mechuyev to do that? Is there? How about the raspberries? One of the ways that they tell you to check that, you can check that. Raspberries are very hard to check because they're very delicate, and they have a cavity on the inside where the bugs hide. They're very hard to check. So, one of the ways you check, I'm not saying this is the only, one of the ways to check it is soak it in water, okay, and then pour the water, after you soaked it in water, pour the water through a cloth and check that cloth then for bugs, okay? But you know what happens after you do that? The raspberries look like raspberry jelly. That's what they look like. You know, they look like they've been beaten up, which is what they have. Okay? So the question is, are you mechuyev to do that? And probably it depends on whether your thing is muchzik or meat hamotzi. If it's asim deraisa, can't eat it unless you check it, no matter what it takes. If it's asim derabanan, you're probably not mechuyev to go to such lengths. But of course, it depends on what your lengths are. I mean, there are different ways to check. I'll give you extreme examples, okay? But there are other ways to check some of these things. And lastly, within checking, is a question, and this has to do a lot with the bagged salads, which is as follows. One way to make, you all seen bagged vegetables, cut up lettuces and things like that have a hechsher on them. Okay, and as a rule, those things have a hechsher sometimes, but not other times. Okay, that means, you pick up the bag, and the way they usually do on the date code, they either stick in the symbol or they don't, depending on whether it's good or bad. Okay, now, there's different ways to do that. Okay. The better way to do that is you have a mashgiach. The mashgiach comes down there. He samples. We're not going to talk about how you sample, but he does sampling. He does a certain amount of sampling. If he thinks this is a good batch, then he says, okay, today's stuff can have a hechsher on it. If the batch comes in and he says, no, it's not a good batch, then today it doesn't get a hechsher on it. Okay, that's the proper way to do it. Okay. There's a mashgiach there, and every day that he checks, he tells them yes or no, or maybe once a week they do it. Maybe once a week they make the stuff with the hechsher on it. That day the mashgiach goes down, checks the stuff to see if it's clean, and if he finds it clean enough, then he lets it go, and if not, no lettuce that week. However, there are others who do as follows. They say this. If the lettuce comes in at a certain level of infestation, this or below, the company's cleaning of the lettuce will get it clean. There'll be no bugs left. If it comes in above that level, then the company's cleaning won't do a good enough job. Okay? They make up some kind of an amount, and what they do is then they count on the company to judge whether it came in above or below that level. You see what I'm saying? We'll make up a number. The company has a tolerance that, let's say if there's up to, I'm going to make up a number. If there's up to 10 bugs per pound, they'll let it for their own quality purposes. That's for they're good enough, up to 10 bugs per pound. The hashkacha decides that if there's up to 3 bugs per pound, then the cleaning system will get rid of those 3 bugs. If there's more than 3, it won't get it clean. They let the company then say, if there's less than 3 bugs per pound, if they judge it to be less than 3 bugs per pound, put the symbol on it. If there's more than 3 bugs, don't put the symbol on it. Okay? And what they're counting on, that the company has its own professional pride, which is something called umun lamar nafshe. A professional is trusted, even if he's not Jewish. He doesn't have them honest. He's trusted because his reputation, good word, his reputation is on the line to do what he said he's going to do.
Why can't you apply mirsus to that also?
So what's the mirsus?
Because the mashgiach might come in that day, and he'll find out that they mattered one that had more than 3.
Okay, even better than that. What they did is the hashkacha buys stuff off the shelf. They go to the supermarket, they buy the stuff off the shelf with their hashkacha on it to see whether it's clean or not. Okay, so the company knows that they're checking on them. Okay, so it sounds like it should work. Okay, it sounds like the only problem is that this hashkacha, one of the hashkachas involved, had to drop some of their companies because they weren't following the rules. Okay, tells you something about how much of a how much professional reputation they have on the line. And many places didn't agree with the umun lamar nafshi in this case because the company's own standard is to let 10 go by. In our example, we made up 10 per pound. It's fine for them. They're selling it every day of the week, right? They sell stuff for that hashkacha. So professionally, it's okay to sell 10 per pound. That's professional. That's acceptable. So, but the rabbi told him 3 is not acceptable for me. So the only person who's going to think he's underhanded is the rabbi. Okay? Does umun lamar nafshi apply? Most people did not think that umun lamar nafshi applied in that case.
Was there ever a situation where the company standards and the hashgacha standards were the same?
No. No, companies stand, and people
They always led more.
are very
than the
upset about
hashgacha
this.
would let.
Yes, company standards of what's considered tolerable is nowhere near what a hashgacha would accept as tolerable. That's not no such thing. Okay, one of the hashgachas said, you'll laugh, they almost always, basically always reject people who want to get hashgacha on big salads. Why? They have a very simple test. They say to them, guys, send us any batch you want to. In other words, pick someone from a good day or whatever, and send us the samples, and we'll tell you if it's good. Before we have hashgacha, we're not coming out to the factory. Just send us some samples from a good day, and they always find bugs. The companies getting to pick what they want to, send them some samples, they always find bugs. Because from the company's perspective, what we don't want to eat is like way off the radar from what they're concerned about. They don't get concerned.
Salads and romaine or
So what it is this. So the CRC was involved once with one of these hashgachas. Not we were given the hashgacha. We were just consulting, so to speak. And the hashgacha was letting the company decide. And the CRC mashgiach went down there. I think it was for 11 days in a row. Okay. For 10 out of those 11 days, he could not get clean produce that he was satisfied with. Okay. So out of those 11 days, one day made it and 10 days didn't. And at that point, they just gave up. They said, this is obviously we can't keep up with this standard. Okay. So the CRC tells people there are some salads. Typically it's the flat leaf lettuces that are easier to clean, like iceberg is easy to clean. Those company cleaning systems, they're not so infested to start with. The cleaning systems do a good job on them, and you can eat those basically without hashgacha. Okay, the hashgacha doesn't make it worse or better. The ones that are curly leaves, like romaines, those are curly leaves, those are harder to clean, and they typically have more bugs in them anyhow. The company's cleaning systems do not do the trick. So then, the company's doing something, so you might want to buy it and check it yourself. You're starting with something that's a lot cleaner, okay? But they don't take the hashgachas that's on it. What they'll tell you, to be more politically correct, is that you should only use it with a reputable hashgacha. Okay, that's what they'll say to you. But in this scenario, what's reputable for every other situation may not be reputable for this. They have a different sheet of how to deal with this specific shiloh. So while you might eat their cookies with that hashgacha, doesn't mean you'd eat the big salad with that hashgacha. Okay?
Can I ask your names?
Yeah, afterwards. So again, the flat leaf, and while we're talking about lettuces, I'll just throw it in. If you want to eat things like romaine, okay, but really the best thing, we tell people, I did this for myself, for Pesach, if you buy romaine hearts, okay, romaine hearts are just the center of the romaine lettuce with the outer leaves pulled away, and for some reason, particularly Andy Boy seems to be particularly clean, but all romaine hearts are much cleaner than full heads of romaine. Okay, and you could buy them in Ted's, you could buy them in Sam's Club. They come in a pack of 3 or 6 of them, a lot of them, and those are much cleaner than the other stuff is. So you still check it, but you're starting off with something that's considerably better off. And
those are the things that are together and stuff?
yeah, it's only the leaves that are more tightly packed together, and the outer leaves that are bigger and looser have been peeled off. I guess they make those into salad. I don't know what they do with those. But they sell just the hearts, and those are much cleaner from a bug point of view.
Check those out. I found one too.
I didn't say they're completely clean. I'm saying, but those are much better off. Okay. 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 Move on. We know, we talked about this last week, that if something is in a very small amount, bought to b'shishim, you're allowed to eat it. So, bugs, how many bugs do you think there could be already in a head of lettuce? A couple of bugs. The amount of bugs that are in there would surely be bought to b'shishim. The amount that are in there would surely be more than 60 times as much lettuce as there is bugs. Okay? Why aren't those bugs bottled? So why aren't you allowed to eat it and say whatever bugs are in there are bottled? Okay? So there are 2 reasons why the bugs are not bottled. One is a drabanan, and one's a deraisa. One is a drabanan, is a thing called beria. If something is whole, complete, it can't be bottled. So a whole bug is not going to be bottled. So if there's one whole bug in a whole large amount of lettuce, that bug can't be bottled midrabanan. Okay, because midrabanan, a whole thing is too important and it can't be bottled. There's a second reason, a deraisa reason why it can't be bottled, which is bittul only happens when things are mixed together in a way that you can't separate them. If they're mixed together in a way and you could get the isser out, imagine if a piece of chazer falls into your soup. Okay? Or what happened once to us. A neighbor of ours. They you can laugh. They were making gefilte fish. And the way they make their gefilte fish is in balls. Okay, they grind up the fish and make it into a ball. Okay, and I think it was the husband doing it. That's why it's happened. He was making the gefilte fish, and he took the ball, and instead of putting it into the pot to cook the gefilte fish, he put it into the chicken soup. Okay, he dropped it into the chicken soup pot. So he had fish cooking in his chicken. Okay, we don't eat fish and meat together, so now we had chicken and fish, mamash cooking together. Okay, he put the ball instead of dropping into this pot, he dropped it into that pot. So there were two parts to the shiloh. The first part was, you got to fish the ball out. Obviously, you can't keep it in there because it's not mixed in. Once we had fished it out, then there was a second shiloh was whether you could eat the rest of the soup left over afterwards. Okay, but so something that's able to be removed, if the isser could be taken out, you got to take the isser out. That's a device. It's not even mixed together. It's not going to mixed together. So if there's a bug in my lettuce and I could just look at the lettuce and just take it off, that's not mixed in even with the rice because I could just take out the isser. I can just take the bug off. Okay? What's the difference? What's the difference between asam and the rice and the rabbanan? Because you may have heard this. There are those who say that you could eat broccoli. They don't say it anymore. They used to say you could eat broccoli without checking it. Why? Because they said the bugs are usually in the florets on the top. They're so hard to get out that it's considered to be mixed together. Since it's mixed together, the question is there a whole bug or is there not a whole bug in there? Okay, well, something that's only a whole, when we say barrier is not batul, that's only midrabanan. So they said it's a suffix if there's a barrier there or not. So suffix drabanan is mutter. And what do you say?
It's not whole.
And they said, well, it's not even sure there might even be bug altogether. And they brought a raya from a Shlomo Kluber has a tshuva like this. Okay, now the other hashkachas all disagree with this, and the reason was very simple. They agreed in principle. Yes, if it would be a suffix barrier, it would be mutter. But they said but we could show you how to find the bugs. It's not so hard to take it out. If with a little training, you could find the bugs yourself also. You could look for the bugs and take them out. So if something can be taken out, also midaraisa. I mean, midaraisa, it's not going to be bugs. It's not suffix drabanan l'kula. It's suffix deraisa l'chumra.
These bugs are not little tiny bugs that are between dandruff and
No, these are bugs that you can recognize. So if you learn how to flip through the florets properly, you'll be able to get them out also.
So don't all of these things sort of beg the question, though, from the original point that you made about Lonit, the turtle, and Lachkan Shardis? I mean, people have gone through training process in order to get to this level.
Mm-hmm.
20 years ago, this training process didn't exist. People didn't know how to take them out. 30 years ago, 40 years ago, however long ago you want to go, right? Only until people started making themselves crazy in order to figure out all of these different ways to get it done, people talk us resimach on the fact that we can't get them out.
Okay, so the answer to that question is, that about 30 years ago, there were a group of people who were trying to make people more aware, sensitive to issues with bugs. And they came to my parents' show, and they showed, I think, a video, if I remember correctly. I was a little kid, but the way I hear the story, I think they showed a video of different bugs in different places, in different vegetables. And then they got up and said, and therefore, this is what you have to do to check them. And they gave an explanation, and blah, 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 blah. So my mother came home and said, I don't understand. She says, doesn't everybody check the lettuce? What were they telling us? Of course that's what I do. My mother checks the lettuce. That's what I do also. So what I'm saying to you is that what some people look at is as like newfangled, and it's like, oh, then somebody developed, they found these new things. Other people were always doing it. So what it might be news to me, I might not know. I may not have been brought up in a way that I would know to look for bugs like this, but there are plenty of people who have. It's not a new art. Mama says, of course I check vegetables. Well, what else would I do? Well, of course I do. That's what my mother did. That's what I did. So some people it's not, what I'm saying to you is that people have become, there are people trying to censorize others, but it's not to say that people before weren't doing that. Okay?
It's not training, it's an awareness.
Yeah, and it's a certain amount of training. What I mean is like this. If I tell you that strawberries have bugs in them, and you look at strawberries for 10 hours and don't see any, I tell you, you have to look at the green part under, where the green part on top is, and you look for it, and then you start seeing it, so that's like normal. You just like you say is anything.
Okay, but then there's the other guy who came in and showed you how to find the bugs, on the rest of the strawberry, and he says it's normal. It's normal. Look, there's 5 of them right here.
Right.
There's no one's been finding the bugs in the strawberry. You showed me by looking at infrared.
Right. So if I had to look by infrared, no. But there's a certain amount of sort of what people just learn from each other. Okay, which is just everyday information that you learn from the next person. you didn't know until you learned that. Someone has to point it out to you, and then once you hear that, then you know what you have to do. Whatever falls into that category is what you have to learn. Things that are beyond that are like, into, very difficult, or like that nobody would have ever figured this out, that you don't have to do.
That's already a training.
That's beyond.
That's already an exclusive training process.
Yeah, that's great. And I'm coming to that. Right to the next thing. We're almost done. Okay, right to the next thing, which is, I don't know if you heard about this, but it happens every 10 years. Okay, so if you didn't hear it now, you can go back to sleep, and in 10 years from now, you'll hear it again. Okay, it'll happen again. For sure it's going to happen. Which is, people say that there are bugs in fish. Okay? It's true, there are bugs in fish. People can say that there are bugs in fish. And they say that you can't eat fish unless you take the bugs out. So, to understand what's going on with that, I have to tell you something, which is a surprise to most people. Most bugs are not usher unless they walk, unless they move on the ground or in the water. Okay, that is to say, if you have a bug, and this was the main reason why the bugs in the raisins were not a problem, the bugs that develop in raisins, the eggs get laid in the raisin after it's off the ground. Okay, when it's sitting on the floor drying, the bugs get into the raisin, the eggs are laid in the raisin, and the egg hatches, and the bug never leaves that raisin. Okay? It eventually leaves the raisin, but any bug that you find on the raisin, that is where he was born, and that's where he's been living for a couple of days until he reaches a new stage, which point he flies away. Okay, but any bug that you find on a raisin, I'm not talking about bugs from storage. The bugs that they kept finding, Drosophila, whatever it was, those bugs are bugs that were born and hatched right on that raisin. They never left the raisin. Okay, the thing is, that bug is mutter. You're allowed to eat a bug if it never crawled on the ground. These bugs, so they're off the tree. When the bugs get on, they're not usher. If it would have been hatched on the tree, that would be different. It was hatched off the tree, then it's mutter. And the same thing for bugs in water also. If they didn't move out of that fish, they were hatched in a fish, and they never left the fish, you're allowed to eat them. Okay? So the Gemara says, we're not even talking about placement. The Gemara says, if you find bugs in the intestines of a fish, you're not allowed to eat them. Because those bugs were swallowed by the fish. The fish was swimming around, he ate another fish, or he ate a bug, and now what you're finding in its intestine is a bug that's been swimming around the water. If you find a bug in the flesh of a fish, you're allowed to eat it. Because those bugs are born in the flesh of the fish, and if you find it in the flesh of the fish, it never left that fish. It's always been in that fish. And since it's always been in that fish, it's not usher. It is a bug. It's not a bug that's usher. You're allowed to eat it. Okay? So Gemara, brought in Shulchan Aruch. Nobody disagrees. So what's the tumult? Okay, so what's the problem? The Gemara says that the bugs in the flesh of the fish are mutter. Tumult is, people say is, we see that those bugs coming from the outside. We could tell that those bugs aren't born inside the fish, they come in from the outside. Okay? So now, when you hear that, the first thing is you're very suspicious. It's ridiculous. The Gemara says that it comes from the outside. The fish, I believe me, that the fish in the Atlantic Ocean are doing the same thing they were doing 2,000 years ago. Right? They didn't change. I'm not talking about fish that are being farmed, that maybe are raised differently. The big fish are still eating the little fish like they have been since my Sabracious. That doesn't change. So what else? All the bugs, the Gemara says the bugs come from the inside. These guys say, no, the bugs come from the outside. We see the bugs coming in. So how do you understand this? So wait a second. Okay, so we know that something's suspicious. But what's going on? The answer is, there's another Gemara. This you may have heard, which is, the Gemara says that you're allowed to kill lice on Shabbos, certain kind of lice on Shabbos, because those lice, the only things you're not allowed to kill are animals that are born from a mother and a father. These lice don't come from a mother and a father. They are spontaneously generated. They come on their own. And since they come without a mother and a father, therefore they're not the kind of a bug that's usher to kill on Shabbos. Okay, the Hilchot Shabbos put on the side for a second. But what's been pointed out by 1,000 apikorsim is the Gemara said, this is a very shadin, it's more than Shulchan Aruch, and we all know nowadays, scientifically, that that's not true. They're not born from there's no spontaneous generation. Okay, we scientifically know that. So 1,000 apikorsim have said, see, look at the rabbis in the Gemara didn't know what they were talking about. They said it's spontaneous generation, which was a belief at that time, that something called spontaneous generation, and they made a whole din based on it, and we all know that it's not true. No such thing as spontaneous generation. Okay, so what's the answer to that question? What did the Gemara mean when it said that? How do we understand that?
Well, we perceive what's going on.
The answer is,
Based on the knowledge they have then.
No.
Just like you said.
So you're saying is that nowadays you're not allowed to kill a kina. And when the Gemara said you're allowed to, the Gemara is making a mistake.
No, I say the Gemara made a mistake.
The Gemara do it based on their knowledge. Okay.
No.
There's a much better answer. Okay.
2,000 years later,
I understand.
I would have
Okay.
possibly differently.
You could say that. You could say that. There's a much better answer. And the answer is like this. It goes back to what we said a long time ago, which is like this. The Torah tells us to view things based on what we can see with our regular eyes. Okay? What we would see with our eyes is if you see a cat give birth, okay, when you see a cat give birth, you could see with your own eyes that this cat came from a mother. When you see a chicken lay an egg, you see a fish lay an egg, you see that it comes from a mother, the parents will mate, and you'll see the fish maybe it's outside, whatever, you see something going on, and you see with your own eyes what's happening, the mother and the father. With these kinim, what happens when the eggs are laid is on a microscopic level. What happens on the thing that an average person cannot see. So from our perspective, there was no mother and father involved. When this egg moved from being microscopic to being visible by the naked eye, that's when it's considered to have appeared on the world. Okay? When a cat is born, it's already big enough to see what it is. This thing is considered to have been born, to have started existence when it crosses the line to becoming visible. So when these kinim go from being invisible, meaning not visible, not identifiable by the human eye, to being visible, at that point, there's no signs of a father and a mother. These things came from nothing. So in din, they're considered to have come from nothing. Not that in practice there really was a father and a mother.
Why would that be different? All these experts looking at vegetables and saying, look, I can see the microscopic bugs, but with my naked eye, even if I can tell, oh look, there's a spot here, which now it's moving. I can't see that it was born from mother and father. As far as I know, it's like rice. It's so small.
Born from mother and father is especially the Shabbos. Nothing to do with bugs. Bugs are usher to eat even if they weren't born from mother and father. I'm talking about is, you see from that din that when something crosses the line to being visible, that's when it's considered to have started existing. Now it was born. Now it started existing.
What about the raisin?
If at that point it started existing, there was no mother and father. So for Hilchos Shabbos, you're off the hook. Well, Hilchos Shabbos, it's not usher to kill that bug. And but let me just finish it with the fish. The same thing with the fish. If the bug enters the fish at a level that a regular person cannot identify as a bug, then in din that didn't happen. In din, we ignore the fact that something fell into this fish because what fell in was something that no one can see, no one could recognize. At the point when that spot gets big enough to be considered visible, that an average person can tell that it's a bug, that's when it's born. That's when it started moving. From the time that it was born until today, it never left the fish. So what you see in the fish is something that was born in the fish. You say, no, it wasn't born in the fish. I know that it was born over there, and it swam into the fish. But when it came into the fish, it wasn't at a size that anyone could see it. Therefore, it's considered to have been born in the fish. And since it was born in the fish, it's mutter to eat it. Okay, now, and if you're paying attention, so it's l'shitasa. The people who say that you're not allowed to eat the bugs in the fish is because they see things that are below what we consider to be visible, and they say, aha, that's visible, so I saw it go into the fish, it went into the fish, now it's us to eat it. Most people say that things that are at that level of visibility don't count. So we say it was born in the fish. Okay? Now if you believe me that l'shitasa, so now we don't have to feel, now not only do we now understand what the machlokes is, but now the Gemara's on our side. Okay? Because the Gemara says you're allowed to eat the bugs that are on the flesh of the fish. Okay? The Gemara says that, it's brought Shulchan Aruch, nobody disagrees about that. Okay? When they asked the Shayla to Moshe Weinstein 30 years ago, they wanted him to write a tshuva that the bugs in the flesh of the fish are mutter. They asked him, could you write a tshuva? He said, no, I won't write a tshuva. He said, well, there's all kinds of people making a whole ruckus about it, they're putting up signs, you know how it goes. So he says, if I write a tshuva, then people will say so here's his explanation for why he thinks it's mutter, and they disagree, so I'll go like the Machmirim. It'll make it as if there's a discussion. If I write a tshuva to say why it's mutter, then you say, okay, he holds this, and he holds this, and I'll go like the Machmirim. But if I don't want to dignify it with a response, because that makes it imply like there's something to talk about. Okay, it's so obvious that it's mutter. It's in Peirush Gemara. So it's so obvious that it's mutter that I don't even want to dignify by writing a response. That's what he said to them. Well, he didn't want to write a tshuva for them. Okay, but you hear now the l'shitasa that when you start viewing things at a certain size as being a bug, then you bang into this Gemara that said that thing is not a bug. Okay, and that's sort of l'shitasa, and that's so the truth is that that the bugs in the fish are mutter. Almost every one of the all the mainstream American hashgachos ignore the bugs in the fish. In Eretz Yisrael, they're very particular about it, and even some of the Hasidic Hashayim in America are makbid on it also.
Why?
The CRC once was makbid on it, I tell you, I'll be honest with you, because some stuff was going to Eretz Yisrael, and the Israeli hashgacha said, we don't want to take it unless you get rid of the bugs. We said, okay, tell us what we should do, and so we did it, because, the way I tell people is that, imagine if they say to us, we only want it in blue bags. So we say, okay, you want it in blue bags, we'll put it in blue bags. Okay, you want us to write our names in Hebrew, we'll write our names in Hebrew. So you want us to get rid of those bugs, we'll do it, but we don't really think that it requires it. Yes?
What's the problem if you have a Gemara and Shulchan Aruch? Why did they go
So
crazy?
the answer is, because I'll tell you, the people involved in this, some of whom I know, have approached poskim and say like this: there are bugs in flesh of fish, and so they should be usher. And the poskim is going to say back down, wait, the Gemara says it's mutter. You know that. They say right, but I saw that the bugs going in. I could see it. They say, come on, you saw it yourself, or you saw it with magnification? No. I can see myself. I see it all the time. You can see, here, I'll show you. I have videos, and I see it all the time, and the bugs go into the flesh of the fish. So he said, but the Gemara says not like that. So no, it must have changed, it must be different, okay? But I'm explaining to you the missing link over here, which is the person can come in and there's a whole room full of people to swear that they saw it going into the fish, and they really did. But they're not qualified. They're overqualified to be looking at that thing, okay? They're seeing things.
Fooling the poskim? What are you doing?
Yeah.
Well, think about this. When in Gemara Sukkah, just yesterday, and the Mishnah says that you can eat casually outside of Sukkah. Okay, don't worry about it. Very next Mishnah says, "With Yochanan Zakat with Gamliel, you bought a little tiny thing to take to Sukkah to eat." Gemara explains that by saying, "This is the halacha." But if you want to be machmer, you don't have to worry that you're being a bad guy. Because look, Yochanan Zakat with Gamliel did it too. So the point that the Gemara says, okay, this is mutter, doesn't mean that you don't have to be machmer if you want to be machmer. You're just saying, big yeven, it's okay.
So you're saying is that even though these same bugs have been in the fish since Adam Rishon, the same bugs have been there since Adam Rishon, and all the people in the Gemara ate the same fish that we're eating. So they ate the same fish that we did. Nobody bothered to tell us that it's better to not eat those bugs. Maybe I can't say that that's not correct. I'm saying there's nothing different about our white fish and theirs. I don't know if they put out the fancy platters, and I don't know if they had white fish, maybe they had different fish, but Pachas it's the same stuff. Okay, so maybe it is. We could question that. Maybe you have something to say. Maybe there's timtum alei from eating such a bug. I'm not convinced. The Torah says you're allowed to eat it. The Torah says this is not kosher. It's like saying, is there timtum alei from eating chicken? No, you're allowed to eat chicken. But I think there is. The Torah says you're allowed to eat chicken. You're allowed to eat other birds. You're allowed to eat this bug. You're allowed to eat. Okay? It's a shiloh, but whether there's timtum alei from eating a bug that's not usher, these bugs are not usher. Okay, it's hard to absorb it, but the bugs don't become us until a certain point. To the point the poskim ask, I'll just throw something at you. The poskim ask, I told you that bugs can't be bottled because they're a barrier, right? They ask, a barrier is only not bottled if it's been usher from the time it was created. The poskim is, bugs are not usher from when they're created. When a bug is created, it's not usher. When a bug is created, it's mutter. Only when it walks does it become usher. A bug that hasn't walked, it is not usher. So they ask, so why is it usher as a barrier? Where do the poskim talk about that? Okay, so let me throw one last thing in, just to finish up my last page here. One last thing here, which is, there's one more hector for bugs, okay, which you may not know, which is when a bug gets dried out for 12 months, when it's been sitting for 12 months, it gets so dried out that it becomes mutter. Okay, it becomes like dirt, it becomes completely mutter. Okay, you say, okay, who cares? What in the world am I supposed to do with that piece of information? It's very negate. It's in every one of your pantries, which is, herbs are something that have lots of bugs in them. They're these leafy little things that grow on the ground. They have loads of bugs in them. And the companies do a poor job of getting rid of those bugs. A certain amount they do. So fresh herbs need to be checked. Like parsley, things like that, they need to be checked for bugs. Frozen herbs is not something that we usually see in our houses. There's a little bit around the market, but mainly it's a commercial thing. It can only be used if they're in fact cleaned well. Okay, so they use like if you buy pizza sauce, a better one will have frozen herbs in it instead of what we'll talk about in a second. Okay, that's the better way to do it. So those things have to be checked also because they just take whole herbs and they chop them up and they freeze them. But what happens if you want to have dried herbs? Most of the herbs that we have in our house, parsley and things, oregano, are not fresh. They're in a jar. It's dried out. So those herbs are mechanically dried to the same level of dryness that happens if you leave the herbs out for 12 months. So what you're doing it mechanically. You're not doing it by letting it sit for 12 months. If you put a piece of parsley out in the sun for 12 months, it would dry up and sort of look like that, like the parsley that's in your house. But what they're doing it is mechanically. And in an hour, I'm making this parsley be 12 months dried in an hour. Okay? Most places can hold that that's mutter. I think there's a documentary about it. Most hold that that has the same thing, has the same status. If you dried it out mechanically, and therefore you'll find herbs, all these kind of herbs have hashgach on them, and then do almost nothing to get rid of the bugs. Okay? Because they go through a mechanical drying, that the bugs, any bugs that might in there got dried out also. Now, in the dried herbs, they actually might filter out the bugs. That's an advantage. But they drying them out, and almost everybody holds that's mutter. You should know, I know the badats, I don't know if others do this, the badats, what they do is very interesting. Their herb companies, their dried herb companies, make the herbs, the badats puts them into a warehouse and doesn't let them sell them for a year. Because they want them to dry out, the din says in a year they become mutter. They make the herbs, stick them into a warehouse, and a year later they're allowed to sell. But most hold that the mechanical drying does the same trick. Okay? One last part of that is, there's another way to get herbs. This is really fancy, much fancier. Most of us will never see these, which are freeze-dried herbs. Okay? Freeze-dried herbs are much more sophisticated. And freeze-dried herbs go through a drying process, but not anything like the regular drying. Regular herbs that you have in your house, the air-dried herbs, are dried with heat. Freeze-dried herbs are dried with a much fancier process. There's more of a debate, but most hold, at least now, that those are all, the bugs in there are also that have been dried out. And the way we convinced Poskim to hold like that, there had been a machlokes about it, was we went to one of these places that makes herbs, and they have a place, there's a part of the company, it's for like a horror movie. They have a certain place where they do something to the herbs, and in the bottom of this wheel is a bucket. And that bucket is got 10,000 bugs in it. The thing is literally crawling with bugs. If you imagine throwing a potato into this thing, how many bugs can eat this thing? That's part of their cleaning process. It's got thousands and thousands of bugs. So what we did was we scooped some bugs out of there and freeze-dried them, okay, to see what would happen to them. Okay, and freeze-dried, when those bugs were freeze-dried, then brought them to Poskim to look at it to say whether they thought it would reach the same status as the other dried herbs, which they did. That was its own story. But anyhow, so most of you are never going to see freeze-dried herbs. It's not a thing that most people get to. But those are also considered, at this point, almost everybody holds those things are mutter, as are the dried herbs you have in your house for this din of 12 months, because they're artificially 12 months. Okay, if you want to be makbid, you could do it. You can buy it, leave it in your pantry, and come back a year later. Okay, thank you.